Would you stand and join in the singing of the national anthem? Please be seated. Good afternoon. I'm Earl Kahn, the Dean of the College of Communication, Information, and Media. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural ceremony, and I'd like to begin by introducing some of the persons on the platform on behalf of the faculty of the college who represent the others on the platform. So on their behalf, I would like to introduce those persons at this point. Would you please stand as I read your name, and would the audience hold its applause until the conclusion of the introductions? John Worthen, President of Ball State University. Allen Neuharth, Chairman of the Freedom Forum. Warren Vanderhill, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. Angel Spiru, a Dayton, Ohio senior. Tom DeWeese, President of the Ball State Board of Trustees. Penny Thomas, member of the Ball State Board of Trustees. Krishna Thomas, student member of the Ball State Board of Trustees. Thomas Kinghorn, Vice President for Business Affairs. Douglas McConkey, Vice President for Student Affairs. Richard McKee, Executive Assistant to the President. Beverly Pitts, Associate Provost. Gene Wittig, Assistant Dean, College of Applied Sciences and Technology, who's been replaced by Don Smith, I see, who is the Dean. Eric, even I can tell the difference. Eric Kelly, Dean of the College of Architecture and Planning. John Fitzgerald, Associate Dean, College of Business. Margaret Marion, Dean, College of Fine Arts. Ronald Johnstone, Dean, College of Science and Humanities. Bruce Hazeski, Chairman of the University Senate. Mary Wise, Associate Dean of the College of Communication, Information, and Media. And the four chairs and directors of the academic units in the college: Stephen Bell, the Edmund F. and Virginia Ball Professor of Telecommunications and Chair, Department of Telecommunications; Richard Nitkovic, Chair of the Department of Speech Communication; Ray Steele, Director of the Center for Information and Communication Sciences; and Marilyn Weaver, the Acting Chair of the Department of Journalism. Would you join me in greeting our guests? Please be seated. I'd like to also recognize our colleagues sitting in the first rows of the center section who represent mostly Ball State University and its other 6 academic colleges. And there are a few visitors with us also from other universities. Tim Travers Healy probably gets the award for traveling the greatest distance from his home in France. But welcome our other colleagues in the first couple of rows, if you would. Several persons have heard me say, and so forgive me for repeating it for those who have heard it, but I consider this to be a defining moment in the life of Ball State University. Not a comparison, because it can't be compared, but the incident that comes to my mind when I think of a defining moment occurred in a hot August day in 1963, when in the heat associated with the reflecting pool and the Lincoln Memorial, I stood about 150 feet from Martin Luther King Jr. I was a reporter then, when he made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Anybody in that 200,000 people, any person in those 200,000 people who were there knew without question that it was a defining moment in history. My life teaches me that there are some other times when you're not aware that it's a defining moment, and you only come to realize that later. This, I think, and I'm not comparing it at all to the speech of Martin Luther King, but this is, in its own way, I believe, a defining moment for Ball State University. If you were to, and some of you will be here, and so this will be easy for you to check it out, but if you were to revisit this university in 10 years, 15 years perhaps, maybe even as briefly as 5 years, and you were to observe what is going on at Ball State University, what's the core of Ball State University, what's happening at Ball State University, why is Ball State University known, what is it doing? There'll be a number of answers, of course, but one of those answers, without any question, in my judgment, will be the College of Communication, Information, and Media. This is truly a defining moment in the life of this university. If you want to know what this college is trying to do, I urge you not at this moment, but a little later when you have a chance, look at the mission statement in your program. It's a very carefully constructed statement written by the four academic heads in the college, gone over word by word, and finally approved as the mission statement. That says as clearly and concisely as we can what this college is trying to do. I would also say, as a word of welcome, that we are most of the way through a communications week, or as some wag put it recently, a week and a half, because it actually started a week ago Wednesday. There have been a number of activities. I'm trying to, with my reporter's hat on, keep a little record of how many people have attended what. And so my figures show me that in the events that we've had up to this time, we've involved 1,465 people. Now, that's not different people, because some have been repetitive, have been to more than one thing, but 1,465. At University, C. Warren Vanderhill, who is going to speak to us about Ball State University and the new college. Provost Vanderhill.
Thank you very, very much, Dean Kahn. It's certainly a great personal pleasure for me to be here today to participate in the inauguration of our 7th college. I realize, of course, that many of you have been working very hard for some time on its planning and implementation. However, despite the fact that you've been kind of up and running for almost a year now, there's a special kind of excitement today, for it signals the formal beginning and official introduction of this college to not only our university community, but to its many and varied external constituencies. An inauguration is an occasion both to celebrate what has occurred and to anticipate new opportunities. And I'm confident about those possibilities for this college because of what I've observed over time in its very excellent faculty and administration. At first, the idea for a new college was abstract and instinctive, something they, and I must say I, hoped would happen, but was not yet clearly formulated. And then the first exploratory steps were taken in stating a purpose, joining in collaborative activities, and beginning to organize an integrated curriculum. Today, As I read the college's clearly articulated mission statement, I see how far we have come in a short period of time. As part of this ceremony, I've been asked to comment briefly on that mission, a mission attainable only through the careful reflection, goodwill, and unified focus that exists among the college's 4 units. In short, the mission of the college is to provide an integrated approach to the study of information and communication. Because of the opportunities and challenges inherent in the information age, it is imperative that we provide our graduates with the understanding, skills, and degrees required to enter the information workforce. A focused, integrated program of modern communication and information studies will help our students succeed in the years that lie ahead. One of their requirements will be the informed use of technology, so an important part of this college's mission will be the study of the many new technologies involved in modern communication. Although communication is essentially a human process, it is mediated by 21st century technologies that affect the lives of us all. We have entrusted to the faculty and students of this college a significant human agenda in studying crucially important information and communications technology which will serve America and the world in the next century. This college can become a true center of excellence in providing leadership and technology at the national level. Of course, this new college is also positioned to assume such leadership on our own campus. As the university moves even farther ahead in its technological emphasis, its administration and faculty will look increasingly to this college to provide expertise, national and international connections, and wise counsel and advice. Another way of saying this is that the college can be the model for curriculum development in the 21st century, the college that becomes the meeting place for the traditional and the technological. To become this meeting place, the faculty will increase cooperative teaching efforts, I am sure. While such efforts have always occurred informally, the ability to change is enhanced by the prospect of merging courses such as communications law and introduction to mass media, and team teaching courses such as electronic reporting and communications graphics. I believe there is a core of studies that binds this new college and that a number of interdisciplinary efforts can certainly result. Today we celebrate the special kind of synergy that will evolve over the next few years as faculty find ways to carry out cooperative, pure and applied research projects, write for joint publication, team teach, discuss each other's teaching methodologies, encourage students in classes and organizations to work together, in short, to cooperate in ways that proximity makes possible. In the midst of all this activity, we must, however, remember that the primary mission is to make the needs of students the highest priority. Almost a year ago now, I charged this faculty to provide their students with the best possible departmental and interdisciplinary education so that they will be prepared for productive careers as professionals and as lifelong learners. This college's faculty can be the model for introducing students to a discipline, becoming their intellectual guides, mentors, and partners as they move through their majors, and then providing the advice and wisdom they need for their capstone experiences. Through organizing internships and bringing professionals to campus, they can make students aware of not only the ethical issues in their professions, but also the problems of the larger society. Further, the college has stated that its mission is to help graduates become more than just employees. That is, to become informed citizens, helping to shape policy in a changing world. As most of you know, the college was created out of a larger structure, the College of Sciences and Humanities, that until recently contained 24 varied and diverse departments. Although the units of the new college have been considered first-rate for some time, we can now expect that as part of a more specialized college, programs with a common focus will more easily establish a public identity. One expected outcome is the opportunity to obtain highly competitive external funding as well as to take a leadership role in fundraising initiatives. Another outcome of public identity is the opportunity to build a larger and more varied number of partnerships with professional communities. Finally, this college has stated that it is committed to creating an environment open to new ideas and responsible participation by all of its members in the continuing process of improvement. So while today is certainly a splendid occasion for rejoicing, I predict that the College of Communication, Information, and Media will experience many more triumphs, both large and small, some noticed, some unheeded, as it makes its way in the years ahead. My hearty congratulations to everyone who has had a part in creating this collegiate unit, and my best wishes for continued success. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Angel Spiru, who will present a student's perspective on the new college. Angel is a senior from Dayton, Ohio, with a double major in speech communication and journalism. She's a member of the College Dean's Advisory Committee and has been selected to represent the students of the college during this ceremony. Angel.
Thank you. Over the past 4 years, I've had an opportunity to attend a number of conferences across the country. Many students, professors, and professionals have come up to me and said, "Oh, I've heard of Ball State. Didn't David Letterman go there?" But more recently, I've had increasingly more people come up to me and say specific things like, "I've heard about your journalism department. I've heard about your debate team. I've read an article by one of your professors." So I believe that one of the most exciting things about the new College of Communication, Information, and Media is that it will bring more attention to programs that are already outstanding. By combining journalism, telecommunications, speech communication, and information and communication science, it will give us the numbers and the recognition we need to compete with other strong communication programs nationwide. Throughout Communications Week this week, we've been talking a great deal about the future of communications. With the explosion of new communication media available to us, we as students need to not only understand new technology, but to also expand our general knowledge base. Integrating the 4 departments into one college will greatly increase our opportunity for awareness of other areas of communication and also help us make us more marketable. On behalf of the student body, I would like to say thank you to all of you who worked very hard to make our new college a reality. To the students who will be around to witness the changes of the new college, I urge you to take an opportunity to get involved with every activity possible. There are so many ways to get involved on campus, and with the new college, there will be so many more opportunities in the future. To all of the faculty, staff, and students of the new College of Communication, Information, and Media, congratulations on this historic event, and good luck in your future endeavors.
Good afternoon. As president of Ball State University, on behalf of the entire university community, I bring greetings to the College of Communication, Information, and Media. We congratulate you, Dean Kahn, the 4 department chairs of our 4 departments, and all the faculty and students in those departments. We are confident that this college will meet the challenges that they face in the years ahead, and we're very pleased to add the College of Communication, Information, and Media as the 7th academic college at Ball State University. It's now my pleasure to award the President's Medal of Distinction to our speaker this afternoon. Allen H. Neuharth, would you please present yourself for the awarding of the President's Medal of Distinction? The Ball State University's President's Medal of Distinction is awarded to recognize unselfish contributions to the advancement of the university, the community, the state, or the nation. Allen Neuharth, you have distinguished yourself for your service to the field of journalism and to the advancement of a free press. For this exemplary service, Ball State University is pleased to award you this medal. Born a poor country boy on March 22, 1924, in Eureka, South Dakota, you studied and worked your way into becoming a multimillionaire by helping build the nation's largest newspaper company and founding the nation's most widely read newspaper, USA Today, proving that the American dream can become a reality. Furthermore, you have worked diligently on behalf of the Freedom Forum. At age 11, you took your first journalism-related job and became a newspaper carrier. As a youth, you worked in the composing room at South Dakota's weekly Alpena Journal. After graduation from Alpena High School, you served in both Europe and the Pacific as a combat infantryman during World War II and were awarded the Bronze Star. Returning to your home state, you entered college and majored in journalism, earning a bachelor's degree from the University of South Dakota. Upon graduation, you took your first position with the Associated Press as a reporter in Sioux Falls. Although your first independent venture, Sodak Sports, failed, your journalism career took off when you hired on as a reporter for the Miami Herald. In 7 years, you worked your way through several editorial positions to become assistant managing editor, and then moved north to become assistant executive editor of the Detroit Free Press. In 1963, you switched from night writer and joined Gannett as general manager of their 2 Rochester, New York newspapers. In 1966, you assumed the presidency of Gannett, Florida, and started a new paper, Today, which was later named Florida Today. USA Today, the nation's newspaper, went to press on September 15, 1982. Celebrating its 15th anniversary this fall, USA Today has proven the skeptics wrong and has become America's most widely read newspaper. Your talent as a journalist is matched by your generosity as a human being and your expertise as a businessman. The Washington Journalism Review named you the most influential person in print media for the decade of the 1980s. You served as president of the Newspaper Association of America. You are the first male from the newspaper industry to be honored by Women in Communication with their highest award, the Headliner. You are the recipient of the prestigious Horatio Alger Award and have been named Businessman of the Year and Newspaper Publisher of the Year. Finally, you are chairman of the Freedom Forum, one of journalism's foremost granting foundations and the nation's largest private charitable foundation. The Freedom Forum works to defend freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of spirit here and abroad. So, Mr. Neuharth, just as you demonstrated your creativity and initiative in starting a national newspaper, so Ball State is exhibiting creativity and initiative in establishing this new college. We hope that we will be as successful as you have been. We're honored to present you this President's Medal of Distinction in recognition of your service to journalism, to a free press, and to free spirit here and abroad.
Thank you, President Worthen. I appreciate that generous introduction. I thought it was a little bit short. Actually, it sounds as though our Public Relations Department wrote it, but despite that, my mother would have believed every word of it. I know better. I do accept with pleasure this Presidential Medal of Distinction. I'm very proud of it. I can tell you all that I eagerly accepted with pride the invitation from your founding dean, Earl Kahn, to participate in this inauguration of what you have a right to be proud, your new College of Communication, Information, and the Media. Faculty and friends and students of the university, and especially to you, Angel, for giving us that student's perspective. I know that Ball State long has been the home of good education and of good journalism. Not many universities this size can boast 2 of the top 10 on anybody's list of media stars. Your own David Letterman, of course, and Garfield the cat, a favorite for our little 6-year-old every morning. Combining these departments of journalism and speech, and telecommunications, and the Center for Information and Communication Sciences now puts your college in the top 10 of undergraduate enrollments of any communication-oriented university departments in the USA. And I have no doubt, under Dean's leadership, that you will soon be in the Elite Eight and then the Final Four. Speaking of the Final Four, while all eyes this week are down the road in the Muncie suburb of Indianapolis, I hope you don't underestimate the importance of the attention that your Cardinals focused on Ball State during their 2 NCAA tourney appearances in the last few years. I can tell you that they're still talking about, as they will in Indianapolis this weekend, about how close Ball State came to derailing UNLV in their biggest year. It's a particular pleasure for me to be at a school that proudly calls itself BSU. I wrote a best-selling autobiography a few years ago called Confessions of an SOB. And I hope that the local newspaper, if it reports on this, will indeed point out that an SOB came to speak at BSU. Perhaps I should tell you about that book, since it's a little part of journalism. You have every right to wonder how a self-confessed SOB like me would have the audacity to appear at an important occasion such as this. Ever since I wrote that bestseller a few years ago, wherever I go, people who know about it say, why would anyone confess to being an SOB? And I think what they're really saying is, why would anyone admit in public to being less than perfect? In that autobiography, I did confess that in more than a half-century of climbing the career ladder, I sometimes schemed and connived a little bit. I never did anything illegal, immoral, or unethical. But I tried to outfax my classmates in high school and in college, as I imagine some of you have done. Later in business, I tried to outfox the enemy or the competition. I tried to outcharm my friends. And perhaps unfortunately, I even admitted in that book that I would tell an occasional fib or a so-called but mislabeled white lie. Now, before you conclude that that necessarily makes me a bad person, let me share with you a true story about white lies involving a former president of the United States and his mother. This is an incident that involves the media. Shortly after Jimmy Carter was elected president, about the time that many on this faculty were born and before some of you students were born, the Washington Post requested an interview with his mother, Miss Lillian, who most of us remember very fondly. During that presidential campaign, Jimmy Carter went coast to coast smiling and saying that he would never lie to the American people. Well, the Washington Post sent a snotty reporter. That may be redundant, Dean. Down to Plains, Georgia, where Mrs. Carter lived. And the purpose of the interview was primarily to prove that her son had lied when he said he never lied. Miss Lillian met the reporter at the door of her home, showed her to a seat in the living room. It was prearranged. The reporter got right to the point, said, Mrs. Carter, your son, the president-elect of the United States, claims he has never lied. Surely you must remember some lies he told as a kid when he was growing up. Tell me about some of them. Mrs. Carter's reply was, well, not a real lie, but maybe a little white lie now and then. The reporter, thinking she had nailed Mrs. Carter, moved right in and asked, what's the difference? Give me an example of a white lie. Mrs. Carter smiled that disarming southern smile of hers and replied sweetly, well, like a minute ago when I met you at the door, and I told you how nice you looked and how glad I was to see you. Well, that's one way of handling the media that I hope you'll keep in mind in the future. I hope also you can agree that if it's okay for presidents or mothers of presidents to tell an occasional flattering fib and then to admit it, that you and I should have no problem with admissions or confessions or the truth, especially about our profession, and even if it makes us look less than perfect. So I'd like to suggest a few minutes this afternoon of truth-telling with each other, even if we have to admit that the world of journalism is less than perfect. Because while I will suggest that to you, I also admit that I think journalism still is more fun than anything else you can do in life, at least with your clothes on. As we approach the turn of the century and the next millennium, I have no doubt that communications in the broadest sense, and you are recognizing that with this new college, in the broadest sense will be the key that brings this globe together for either better or worse. Because our world has indeed become a huge global village, just as Canada's Marshall McLuhan predicted some 30 years ago. One global village linked electronically via the satellite, with now nearly 5.5 billion villagers sharing dramatically changing problems and hopes. And what a challenge, what an awesome opportunity and responsibility that is, especially for anyone in the news and information business. And in this era of instant and constant global communications, there are no more secrets anywhere in the world, from the highest mountain to the lowest valley, or the smallest village to the largest city. I predict that the news and information business will be the fastest growing business in the world in the next century, if we can adapt and change to meet the changing wants and needs of the public. Analyzing history or forecasting the future are fun. Neither are without their risks. Let me just remind you of a couple of predictions of the last century that totally missed their mark. In 1899, that popular magazine, Literary Digest, confidently predicted that the automobile would never come into as common use as the bicycle. And in 1956, just a year before Sputnik and just a couple of years before regular manned space flights, a leading astronomer in Great Britain, Richard van der Woolley, announced that the mere idea of human space travel was utter bilge. Well, note a characteristic of such forecasters. They were all too conservative. No imagination, no vision, no guts, no risk takers. Fortunately, they were wrong, because bold risk takers were willing to break out of their boredom. Risk takers, usually relatively young risk takers, always have and always will revolutionize the world in which we live, because they say no to the status quo. And as we approach the turn of the century, there is no longer any status quo anywhere in the world. You know that these past few years have seen more political changes worldwide, more military changes than at any time in our history. Well, the rest of this decade and the early next century will see more economic and more social changes around the globe than at any time before, and certainly more changes in the way in which we communicate with each other. Much has been said and heard and read about the so-called information superhighway. I think it's a little too early to tell just who will cruise successfully down that highway or who might get hit by a truck. But for you, in this College of Communications and Information and Media, these things are certain in the years ahead and in the next century. There still will be thousands of daily and weekly newspapers, and probably more of them. There still will be thousands of over-air radio stations, and probably more of them. There certainly will be over-the-air television stations and networks and affiliates, and more of them. And there will still be cable stations and direct satellite TV producers, and more of them. Media services. There will be gigantic growth in online and multimedia delivery of news and information and entertainment. And every computer user will be not just a consumer of news, but an editor and a publisher. Ball State's own homepage on the web is part of that network. And even you who are not part of this new college, but are web users, have a stake in the development of that new form of communications. I think the point is that the hunger for information, in the broadest sense and worldwide, will be satisfied by an ever more crowded information superhighway. But that means there will be many more jobs and opportunities for those traveling down that highway, not fewer. It also means that viewers and listeners and readers more and more will want their information when they want it, where they want it, and how they want it. And they're going to want it at home and away, at work and at play, night and day. And they will want a maximum of information in a minimum of time and hassle. And they, as editors themselves, will edit in or edit out what they want, when they want it, where they want it, and how they want it. Well, will that make your job as communicators more difficult? Of course it will. Does it make it potentially more rewarding? Absolutely. The fact is that as this global village grows ever closer together, the free movement of ideas, campus to campus, country to country, continent to continent, is inevitable. And communicators who most effectively create and market ideas will be setting the global agenda of the future, much more so than politicians or academics or the military, as has traditionally been the case. Communications entrepreneurs will determine who travels the fastest and the farthest on that information superhighway. And journalists will determine what travels down that highway. Therefore, I think entrepreneurial journalists will be in the driver's seat. Webster defines an entrepreneur as someone who manages and assumes the risk of a business or enterprise. In my professional media career, I've taken two major entrepreneurial risks, many minor ones. My first one resulted in devastating loss and injury. The second one hit the moon and is in orbit around the Earth. Let me look at both with you just briefly for what I think they mean to any of you interested in information and communications and media in the future. In 1952, a long time ago, but just a couple of years out of the University of South Dakota, a classmate and pal of mine and I started a weekly statewide sports tabloid newspaper we called Sodak Sports. We begged, we borrowed, we stole all the money we could, about $50,000. 2 years later, we had lost it all. Our venture went belly up, and we were bloodied and broke. I was so ashamed that I ran away from home at age 29. I went all the way to Miami, Florida, found a job as a reporter for $95 a week. There, when I wasn't having fun in the sun, I thought a lot about what went wrong with my plan to become rich and famous in South Dakota. And gradually I got it. I didn't really have a plan. I only had an idea. And there's a big difference. I hadn't really considered the risk-reward ratio as we should in any undertaking of ours. I hadn't figured out that I had to pay the rent every month. My first venture in journalism went broke because of mismanagement, and I was the one who mismanaged it. When things like that go wrong, once you admit to yourself that you're the one who screwed up, it's much easier to get up off the floor, dust yourself off, and start again. For the next few years, I tried many new things, as I hope you will in the years ahead. Some of those were big, some were small, some worked and some didn't. But now they were all fun, because I was no longer afraid to fail. I had discovered that failure is not fatal. Chicken Little was wrong. The sky does not fall in. And it's against that background of risk-taking and having fun at it that we at Gannett launched that little experiment in journalism called USA Today 15 years ago. This time, of course, the risk was much greater, but the potential rewards much, much larger. Bobby Kennedy once said that only big risks can lead to big successes. He was talking about politics, but it's true in any business or profession. And so today, USA Today is the most widely read newspaper in this country, nearly 7 million readers a day. It's available on the day of publication via satellite in 96 countries on 6 continents. There's been a lot of speculation about the reason or reasons for USA Today's rather quick popularity with the readers. Some say lots of color, heavy use of graphics and illustrations. Some say it's all those many little short stories. That's what our critics and competitors in the beginning sarcastically called a lot of little shits and bits. They're the same ones, as some here may recall, who labeled us McPaper. And now they have stolen most of our McNuggets. Well, all of those news and editorial features were important, but in my judgment, the biggest single factor was simply this. We looked the establishment in the eye and said, we're going to reinvent the newspaper. We're going to make newspaper readers out of the television generation. We said no to the status quo. Well, what do those two personal experiences, one big failure, one huge success, mean to you? I think whether it's a $50,000 venture by a couple of kids in South Dakota who really didn't know what they were doing, or a nationwide endeavor with a price tag of hundreds of millions of dollars, there are certain common denominators as you seek success in the entrepreneurial area. First of all, a willingness to seek big risks if you're seeking big rewards, a la Bobby Kennedy. And you must remember that in making changes or bucking the status quo, whether on this campus or later, you ought to have not just an idea, but proper strategy, a comprehensive plan. And most importantly, if you want to look the establishment in the eye, you've got to have a very thick skin. When you try anything new or different, most critics won't get it. That's especially true of media critics. And so you can count on them ridiculing you. In the case of USA Today, most media critics wrote our obituary long before we were born. But Thomas Paine once said, and I quote, "The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value." Robert Frost, some of you may be familiar with this favorite quotation. Robert Frost put it this way: "Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." Well, that difference simply is in risking a road less traveled, but in a careful and calculated way. And the fact is that no risk managements generally run no fun and ultimately no win businesses. And fun and winning really are what this game of life is all about. As I said earlier, journalism and the power of it tops the fun list. But I think we journalists and you future journalists must also be responsible for how we use that power. We can preserve the freedom of the press on your campus or in the professional world. We can preserve it only if we deserve it. And we in the media are not winning any good report cards. A nationwide poll by Times Mirror of Los Angeles reports that twice as many people consider the USA media not believable now as was true 10 years ago. Our negative rating has gone from 16% to 32%. Some of you may have read recently, as the basketball season was getting to a climax, that college coaches were debating the merits of their players being exposed to the press in the locker room in the heat of victory or defeat. Several coaches were unenthusiastic about that, said that sports reporters tend to get things out of perspective. But one fellow, University of Maryland basketball coach Gary Williams, said he wanted his kids exposed to the press. He said, and I quote, "They're going to meet a lot of weirdos in the real world. Why not let them talk to reporters?" Well, we need to recognize that many agree with Coach Williams. Many also agree with Charles Kuralt, formerly of CBS TV, who says, and I quote, "The country I see on my television screens and on my newspaper front pages is not quite the country I see with my own eyes or hear with my ears or feel in my bones." And so the truth is that most of the public has a love-hate relationship with the media. It's been ever thus, and that's okay. But it's gotten worse. And our challenge, I think, as communicators, is to be hated a little less, loved a little bit if possible, but certainly to be respected. Perhaps the most effective way for us to disarm our critics is to make sure they understand what we are trying to do, why we make changes, where we're coming from, what our philosophy and our policy and our style is, and why we take certain approaches, because all of those elements certainly have impact on our readers or our viewers or our listeners. The former editor-in-chief of USA Today, John Quinn, put that in perspective before the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. a while back, when he predicted how 4 of the biggest newspapers in the country would handle the ultimate story. Some of you who have been journalists a while or worked around newsrooms know that the ultimate story, of course, would be the end of the world. And we play a little game when we're not busy at night in the newsroom of what kind of headline would you put on that ultimate story? Well, Quinn said he thought that even on that story, the major newspapers would reflect their own philosophies or their own prejudices without admitting it or perhaps even recognizing it. In the New York Times, he said the headline would read, "World Ends, Third World Countries Hardest Hit." See, there are some New York Times readers in the audience. In the Wall Street Journal, "World Ends, Dow Jones Industrial Average hits 0. In the Washington Post, "World Ends, White House ignored early warnings, unnamed sources say." In USA Today, "We're dead. State-by-state demise," page 6A, final sports results, page 6C. Well, I think the thing to remember is that the style, as well as the substance of our communicating, really does have some impact. Now, that does not mean that we should all be uniform in our style or approach. Far from it, in fact. But whatever and however we communicators address our consumers, we ought to level with them. We ought not to pretend that we're something we are not. And we ought to communicate effectively about our mission and our changes. And yes, we really ought to listen to those consumers as well. Your biggest communication challenge in the next century is how to develop a better understanding between the public and the press, and to develop a press that is not only free but fair, because fairness and freedoms must stand side by side, and both need to be exercised regularly. Some of the free spirit that goes into that, incidentally, is what I hope you are evidencing this week, during this communications week. and every day in and out of your classroom. And if you do that, if you exercise a free spirit and combine fairness and freedom, if you follow that path, you will leave Ball State well prepared to serve your profession, your country, your world, and yes, yourself. And if you do that, you will enjoy this wonderful game of life, which I think we should all play to win, but we should remember that life is not an undefeated season. So win or lose, above all, have fun playing this game. Good luck and Godspeed, and thank you for letting me be with you today.
Well, I think, Allen Neuharth, people showed you that they very much appreciated those comments. And whether they take them to heart or not, that's another matter, isn't it? I want to remind us that there are still 2 events left in Communications Week. Tonight is their excellent performance before this program began and assisting throughout the ceremony. We appreciate that. As you leave, this is a commemorative poster. This is a commemorative poster honoring this ceremony. You will find outside the doors as you leave copies of this rolled, so it'll be easy to transport, and we encourage all who would like to have one to take one. It's the college's gift to you to mark today. Also, at the conclusion of this inaugural ceremony, there is a reception in Williams Lounge, the lower lounge of the auditorium, and you're welcome to go down there to visit with friends and with faculty as they come down. Now, one procedural comment. Normally in a situation like this, everyone recesses from the stage. That's not going to occur today because the faculty of the college are to remain for a inaugural photograph that will be taken. So President Worthen will lead the inaugural party, which is essentially the first row out of the auditorium, and our colleagues may exit to their right and out of the auditorium. We'll ask the remainder of the audience to please stay in your seats until the recessional party has passed you. I'm asked to conclude this ceremony. Well, it couldn't be better. A close friend who had a lot to do with many programs of this sort said that no public meeting should last more than 1 hour. It is precisely 1 hour since we started, and with great satisfaction, I conclude this inaugural ceremony at 3 p.m. Thank you very much.
forum is interested in right now. I know they are putting $50 million into their museum.
Awesome. Well, maybe I should write a letter to the editor. Thank you for their choice of words.
Well, the only comment I made to Ron is
What time are you on air?
Oh, I'm not on there, actually.
Oh, you're not on
No,
air.
I'm just recording.
Recording.
I haven't done a package yet for
Well, I told Gene I almost kept it, but I thought it better not.
I give it to you as we leave. Freedom.
Here you're back at work.
Well, I was been at work, but I'm back at Richmond. That's right.
Terrific. Well, that's wonderful.
Appreciate you coming out.
How does it feel to be back home? Been a lot of years. We were talking about Richmond today. It's been too long since I've been there. It's wonderful.
Probably been about 20 years. Huh?
It's been quite that long. It's been a tent tired 8 years old.
All right. Thank you.